Hi everyone and welcome to Mastermix in Conversation With. My special guest today is a Melbourne-based DJ producer and artist who has amassed over 150 million plays on Spotify. With 20 years experience behind the decks, he's regularly found playing at clubs and festivals around the world. With his remix and production work and as an artist, he is constantly in demand with major and independent labels and can be found regularly at the top of the Beatport and Traxsource charts. Please welcome my guest today and to the Mastermix platform, Andy, Sgt Slick.
Good to see you, Paul. Good morning, good evening where you are.
Well, it's great to see you, Andy, and once again, welcome aboard the Mastermix platform. We're really looking forward to having you on board. So, the first logical question really is, where did this start? What was pre-Sgt Slick? What was Andy that formed into Sgt Slick before?
I guess musically started with getting into my parents' record collection. My dad was really into his music, had a decent vinyl collection, but it was a very mainstream taste. He was into Elvis, Beatles, Frank Sinatra, and these kind of artists, classic artists. But he had a great stereo system at home, turntable, amp, reel to reel. I think he had a tape deck. So for me, just getting the vinyl in my hands, placing it on the turntable, just going through the whole motions of that and getting the feel of it and the technology in front of me, just I think sparked something in me really early. And I actually discovered, I've heard a lot of DJs tell this story that using their parents' sound systems, where you discover if you hold the turntable button in and the tape button together that you can get both playing at once, which is a very rudimentary early form of mixing, I guess. And nothing was really ever in time, but for me to hear those two things coming in at the same time, I guess triggered something in a production mindset, I guess, about what might be possible with this very rudimentary technology, as I said, very basic setup. So, fast forward a few years when I had a little bit of money and was able to start buying my own records. I remember the very first record I bought, it was the 12-inch of Duran Duran, The Reflex. And I was just obsessed with it because there was just so many stutters and samples and cuts and edits in it, and it was long. And there was bits in it that weren't in the original version that you would hear on the radio. And I just played that thing over and over and over again. Later found out that Nile Rodgers was involved in the production of it, which kind of makes sense when you look at the sound of the record now. And anyway, at that time, when I was growing up in Australia in the early to mid 80s, we were a very kind of pub rock oriented music scene. FM radio played a lot of Australian pub rock, which is bands like Midnight Oil, In Excess, Cold Chisel, a lot of AC/DC as well. There was really not a lot of dance music, hardly any, in fact. I'm sure there were scenes where it was happening, but to my young ears, listening to FM radio and not really knowing where to find any other sounds, that was the sound that was prevalent to me. And it wasn't until, I guess, my later mid-teen years where your parents send you to bed and you're meant to go off to sleep, but I was in there with my radio trying to find interesting sounds and interesting radio stations.
Yeah.
And I did end up finding one called Triple R here in Melbourne, which is a really popular community station, and they had all kinds of specialist radio shows. And I did find one on a Friday night. I think it was called the Pulsation Dance Club Show or something like that. Anyway, they were playing Euro, Italo Disco, Stockcake and Waterman type records. And these, again, this was another light bulb moment because they were actually mixing the records live on the air. And for me, this, remembering back to those moments on my dad's sound system where I was trying to get two records in time, to hear these guys effortlessly blending from one record to the other was just a mind-blowing kind of thing to me.
Yeah. The realization
Yeah.
really was that you felt a destiny to be a producer initially, not a DJ.
Not probably not. Probably it was. I didn't really think about being a producer at that stage. It was more just like I need to know more about this. I need to know how are they making this record come into the next record without without a gap, without any noticeable change. Like, and that was just my career has been little steps and little leaps throughout the whole time of just discovering new things along the way, and before I knew it, I was actually producing my own records. It was hard to find out information here as well because obviously, no internet, we all know that. But my only way to find out information on dance music was through like this radio station and magazines. So I was waiting every month for Future Music, Sound on Sound, Mixmag, these kinds of publications to come out just to get like some little just bite of information just to help me along the way. Yeah, so that's how that all came along.
Yeah, you mentioned radio as well. That was obviously quite important for you out there in Australia. I mean, you kind of carried that on as you progressed as Sgt Slick with radio mixes. It's obviously been quite important for you throughout your career.
It has, yeah. I mean, it's not something I consciously really decided that I wanted to do, but um, I did find myself on a radio show, first of all, on the Oz Stereo network here in Australia, which is the big commercial radio network. Uh, Along with my studio partner back then, I was given a show on Saturday nights, which went on for about 5 years, 8 till midnight, every Saturday with the massive audience nationally. And that was a great chance to get my teeth stuck into that side of the business. Like I said, I've never really um, had an interest or had an aim to get there, but yeah, we did a lot of like edits for the show, and there was a lot of like acapellas flying in over underground records. It was just a really a way to get like commercial records, blending in with underground records, and get those underground records on the air without, the programmers really realizing because you're playing a known a cappella over the top.
Yeah.
And I've kind of carried that, through my whole career, really. I've never been known as like an underground DJ or a DJ that only plays breaking music on the coolest labels. I've always kept a 1 foot in the more commercial side of it, the more accessible side of the music.
Yeah, let's keep on the DJ tip for the moment before we shoot back to production.
Sure.
Obviously, you've played many gigs across different continents globally. What would be, say, your most impactful and memorable, perhaps in the last decade? Let's just put it in that period of gigs. Would it been, something as intimate as a bar, a club, or a festival event? What we'll discuss the ministry thing later, but just for now, the last 10
Yeah.
years.
Uh, well, when I was living in LA, I used to come back for gigs in Australia quite often, and one year I was booked to play the Sydney Opera House steps on New Year's Eve, a
Wow.
4 hour set uh, with my another production partner, Ivan Goff. We had a little project called La Trick that we used to work on together, and we had a pretty big record. Our first single was called This Feeling. It was a US Billboard #1. It was #1 in the UK as well. And on the back of that, we got booked to play, the Sydney Opera House steps, looking right onto the Harbour Bridge. I guess it's one of the most iconic places to be at
Mm,
the countdown to New Year's, and yeah, that was just an amazing experience. And I've actually
incredible.
ended up back there the last 2 years on the other side of the bridge at Luna Park, doing the countdown there, and it's just an amazing scene.
Fantastic. And with the DJ side of it, have you always been interested in the ever evolving, developing technologies from your early days of vinyl right through to digital? Have you kept a close eye on everything?
I do keep a close eye on everything. Yeah, I try and. I mean, in my life, there's only been what three major changes, I guess. When I started, I was playing vinyl. Um, Actually, the first gig I ever had, I was playing on tapes because, believe it or not, I was DJing on the river cruises on the Yarra River, which is a beautiful river that goes through right through the center of Melbourne, and they have these cruises that
Hmm.
people hire out for the 18th and 21st and weddings.
Yeah.
So I had to record all my music onto these cassettes because the boat is going up, and there's no way you can play vinyl, and CDs weren't even around then. Uh, and I specifically remember one night of all the gigs I did on these boats, there was only one single time when I played a tape, and the next one that was coming in actually synced up, and I was just like, huh, I just
All
didn't
right.
miss.
Yeah, I was going to ask were the tape players Varispeed? They weren't then.
No, no
Oh
pitch
my days.
control. I don't think I've ever seen a tape deck with pitch control, but yeah, that was a funny memory for that. But yeah, like I said, I started on vinyl, moving to CDs. Yes, absolutely. I was one of the first ones with a CD burner, um, and that was a great transition as well because then you could play all those edits and little rearrangements that you'd put together in the studio. You could burn them onto CD, and I think that was a really big development. A lot of DJs had the flexibility to be able to play their own productions really quickly, work on them during the day, play them out that night, that weekend. Um, and yeah, absolutely. When the USBs came along, I was all over that because as someone who travels quite a bit, not having to lug around those CDs and vinyl was a really big thing for me. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a big record box user. I have, everything set up. It's really smoothly. I have smart playlists and all this kind of stuff to make it, hopefully easier at my end because you obviously it's a lot easier traveling with a USB, but you do lose the feeling that I used to love of flicking through the vinyl and coming across things that you might not have come across when you're just scrolling on a
And I see
screen.
you
Which
mentioned the US there. Yeah. What took you from Australia to the US for 7 years? Was it, Andy?
yeah, 7.5 years. I was approached by a production company around 2011 to relocate. I At that point I was actually I wasn't making the kind of music I'm making now. I was more making electro house and big room house, I guess you could say. And I'd had two records that had done very well. I bought out a record called Like This, which uh, got to number two on Beatport, and I think Dead Mouse was number one. Dead Mouse kept me off the top spot. And
Outrageous.
then yes, terrible. And then I followed that up with another one called Everyday, which got a lot of play from people like Cascade, Tiesto, Swedish House Mafia, and all that kind of crew. So I had a little bit of a run going, and yeah, I was approached to work in a studio in downtown LA, run by a quite a prominent DJ over there. And like I said, this was just when EDM was really starting to break. So there was a lot of DJs who I guess weren't producers in the US scene who saw these guys, like I mentioned before, Tiesto, Calvin Harris, Afrojack, David Guetta coming in and landing like very lucrative residencies in Vegas. And yeah, so I went over there and worked in production, did some songwriting, a lot of collaborating and working with different people, a bit of ghost production as well. I did that for like 4 or 5 years. And when I finished up with those guys, I stayed over there for another couple of years, kept DJing, playing around the place. And it just started working actually with a lot more people back from home. I started the production, the Latrick brand with my friend Ivan, as I said before. Um, and yeah, my wife and I actually ended up having our daughter over in the US, and that's when we were decided, okay, we would really like to raise her back home in Melbourne with family, friends, and the beautiful Melbourne lifestyle that we have over here.
And at this time, were you Sergeant Slick, or were you DJing under Andy, yeah, as your real name?
No,
When
I
did?
was. I've always been. Sgt Slick was the first record I ever released back in '98. A record called White Treble Black Bass. So I've always kept that name going. I've come and go. I've worked under a lot of different other names as well that I've never told people about, but I've had different production release names along the way as well. Sergeant Slick has always been ticking along there. It's always been mostly been a house sound, and obviously house music has come and gone in its popularity over the years. And I've kind of tried to adapt by, changing the style ever so slightly, but at the same time, like as I said, working on a lot of different projects, a lot of different
Yeah,
people, and yeah, I love being in the studio here, pretty much 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and also a couple of nights a week. I'll come up here after dinner as well, so I can't possibly release all the records I record as Sergeant Slick because I would be releasing a record, 2 records a week, and
you're
there's
very
no, there's
prolific.
I am prolific, and I find that's the only way that I can keep my workflow really focused because I do find that if I'm away from the studio a week, 2 weeks, uh, it does take me a week to just to get that flow back. Um, some people say, it's like riding a bike, you never forget. But for me, it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah,
I go away and I do forget. I forget my workflows. I forget where things are.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so that's another reason I do like to keep it like a 9 to 5, just to keep my skills set tight and on the money.
Yeah, I think the whole pseudonym thing, the AKA, the different names, etc., is also great because obviously with your musical influences and experience, you've got so many different avenues of styles to go in as well. So you can still have your Sergeant Slick foundation core in the middle, but you can express your creativity with different pseudonyms as well, and it keeps the whole thing fresh.
Exactly, and then then you can be in a situation where you can be working with like 3, 4 different labels who are all like working for your product, and you can have a record that's big in one market, not big in another, and then one of your other pseudonyms is big in this market. It's just a way to really keep things moving forward, and yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy it. It's fun just to watch all the different names like do their own thing.
Yeah, speaking of the labels that you mentioned, Andy, what would be your top three releases, whether it's Sergeant Slick or under a pseudonym? You maybe just straight off the top of your head, your top three favorite releases on other labels, commercially released.
I think my first single, the one I told you about before, White Treble Black Bass, has amazing memories for me. Like you know, it was when I first started producing, and just to think back now about how I made that record, I had a cheap little flat here inner city Melbourne, the the cheapest of gear sitting in the corner of my room on a dining table, and somehow I eked out this record, which went on to it gets signed all over the world. It came out on Vicious here in Australia. It was a #1 club record, uh, airplay on Triple J, which is our big youth radio station, I guess, the Radio One kind of equivalent in the UK. And it came out on Neo in the UK, and a remix from Trevor Rockcliffe, which when I first heard it, I thought, "Damn, that is just the
Oh,
toughest thing I've
Neo,
ever heard."
Eddie's label, Neo. Yeah, yeah, of
That's
course.
right. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Neo Blue. Yes.
Wow.
And then, later finding out that like Carl Cox was a massive fan of the record, and was just thrashing it in all of his sets. And the information would dribble in because no one would get on the phone and tell you, or you couldn't look it up on the internet or see it on Instagram. You see where your records were succeeding. So, it was a Mixmag club chart #1 as well. So yeah, for me, that record holds very special memories because it just opened everything up and opened my mind up as to what might be possible if I, pursued this line of yeah, being a record
That's in,
producer.
that's interesting. So you feel this was your kind of breakthrough moment in, would it have been early 2000s, late 90s then?
It was 1998. Yeah, definitely a breakthrough moment and a breakout and a break in moment, really, because I was just this guy was just fooling around, like I said, on that cheap equipment in my living room, in the corner of my living room, and not really thinking that anything might ever come from it. Just having fun, really. So to get that like taste of success on the first record definitely gave me a lot of encouragement and
Yeah.
motivation to continue in that
Yeah.
field.
That's a really in-depth answer to the question of three. So we just no, it's fantastic to hear this, and
Yeah.
because people can go and search for this, but so people can just quickly go and have a listen to number two and number three. What were they, Andy?
Number two, I think we'll like fast forward 20, 22, 23 years, and it was my cover of Gimme, Gimme, Gimme. I did that not long after I moved back from LA. Look, I was a little bit burnt out after coming back from LA, and I was actually thinking in the back of my mind, do I want to like continue doing this for the rest of my life, the rest of my working life? And
Okay.
had a few thoughts and just came to the realization that I should only be working on things that make me happy. Like I've done a lot of work for other people. I've listened to A&R people. I've you know done a lot of remixes and productions and ghost productions as well. And that I've decided was what was the path I wanted to get off. I just want to make music that made me happy.
Let's park number three because these are fantastic answers, and I want to go straight into this because you've mentioned it. Tell us a bit about the the process of making that "Gimme Gimme" cover. You know, the vocalist you use, the
Yeah.
methodology, your approach, the recording side of it. Let's deep dive into a little bit about that massive hit.
Sure, yeah. Well, that started as an edit, as pretty much everything I do starts as an edit. It's just something that I like to try out to make my DJ set stand aside from everyone else's and make it a little bit more spicy. So a friend of mine had been to the Greek Islands DJing, and he came back and I said, "Well, what's the big sound over there? What's everyone playing this year?" And he said to me, "Believe it or not, like the people are playing ABBA records." I'm like, "Come on, like you're taking me up the river. Tell me what they're actually playing." He's like, "No, like Gimme 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 was a big record. A couple of the other records people are playing." And this is before the Follow More video, which I don't know, I'm sure you've seen the Follow
Oh
More
yeah,
Boiler Room video. Yeah,
yes,
where he
yeah, big
plays Gimme
moment.
Gimme. And I just had a little bit of a think about it. And I came across the Mighty Mouse edit that I knew people were playing and had a listen. And it's great, but doesn't have any of the verses. And I love the verses from that song. I think they're so uplifting and fun. So I quickly got into the studio and just ran down a really simple edit arrangement, just some extra drums underneath. And I remember the very first moment I played it out. I was opening in a small club here in Melbourne in a suburb called St Kilda. There was almost no one there, but I was first on. I came in. And I'm like, I'm just going to try this out just to see how it sounds. I played it, and within like 10 seconds of of that dropping, this people were just running from nowhere. I'm like, where did all these people come from? And has something happened? Like, is there an emergency in another room? But no, they were running to the dance floor because this song had, been virally through TikTok and Instagram, had just got into people's heads, and like I guess I just came along at the right time with the right edit, and yeah, it just really started to take off. I handed that edited around to a few friends, and they were getting the same reactions. And then eventually gave it to another friend, Andy Van, who runs the label Vicious, with another friend of mine, John Course, here in Melbourne. and they suggested we do a cover version of it. So yeah, I'm like, why not? Why not? Well, initially I was like, oh, I don't know if I need an ABBA cover version in my catalog, but they talked me into it, and I'm glad they did because we got the samples replayed through our replay guy in the UK, and anyone who's watching who knows about production knows that when you do an edit, you're just using the 2-track, the stereo file. But when you get a sample replay come back, you get all the little stems. So you get the separate parts of the track. You got the kick, the bass, the strings, everything separated. So that just allowed me to really hone in on the production and get every sound as polished as I possibly could. And now when I go back and listen to that original edit, it's just like, whoa, like I can't even listen to it now because it's just so rough and so raw. But I do actually get a lot of compliments on my replay because people think it still sounds like very close to the original. It's just got that extra thump, the extra low end. I spend a lot of time, like when I do these edits, researching like the era that the track came from, the drum machines that were being used in that time. The bass, were people using synth bass? Were they using live bass? What kinds of percussion were they using at that time? And I really try and match it up to what I'm doing, so it just keeps that authenticity, but obviously with a much stronger low end to really drive it home.
Brilliant. Yeah, and seeing as we've kind of segued beautifully into the world of the studio, the first thing I'm going to say is bravo on a very spick and span, well-maintained and very tidy studio that you obviously have. This must feed your karma whilst you're working. You like everything to be in place, yeah.
Definitely. Well, yeah. I mean, I'll swing around here. As you can see, there's literally
Wow.
nothing in this
Minimal.
room that does not serve a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. When I come here and sit down, I don't want to be distracted. I want to open up Ableton and just get straight to work. And yeah, it's just something I developed over the years as well. Even my Ableton sessions are the same. Like I have a template where everything is really well set up. All my tracks are already named, all my channels are already named, all the synths that I use are already preloaded onto MIDI tracks. My filters are all set up, and I have this Novation launch control. Every knob and slider that appears on my desk is routed into this. So I know every time I reach out over here, I know there's going to be a flanger. Every time I reach out over here, I know it's going to be a filter. I can dial some reverb in on the top. And that just puts me in a space when I sit down here, the familiarity and also, like, you know, the naming of the tracks. I find if I'm ever getting stuck, like, what does this track need? What else can I add? Well, I've got all the names already there. Conga loop, groove loop, closed hi-hat loop. All right, that I can have that. I can have that. I can have that. Add that. Bring one of those in, and it just, you know, all those little things adding up make for a much smoother, more productive process and a more fun process and a faster process. That's the other thing. I can work a lot faster than I used to.
Well, they're all positives. And what's been your DAW journey from early days, Andy? You know, where did you start with MIDI and computers and programs to hard disk recording to end up with Ableton?
The first piece of gear I ever bought was a Akai X7000 sampler, which was a nasty old piece of gear. But I actually used to go to this club in Melbourne called Sanction at the Chevron on Tuesday. And two guys were DJing there, John Corse and Andy Van, who I mentioned before. And they went on to found Vicious Recordings, which is one of Australia's most renowned dance music labels, I guess. And those guys have since become good friends. But at that time, they were doing this night where they had 3 turntables each set up and these keyboards behind them. And I didn't know what was going on. I went in there, as I usually do, and hit the dance floor. And then I hear all these samples like bass, how low can you go? And all these other crazy sounds coming in. I look over and I see John on the keyboard triggering all these things. I'm like, what is going on over here? So I went over and checked out what the keyboard was, and sure enough, the next day I was in the Trading Post, which is our, secondhand goods magazine here in Melbourne,
Yeah.
looking for one, finding it, bringing it home, and just, it took me like 2 weeks to get a sound out of this thing. I didn't know what I was doing, but this was, like I said, a very early sampler, pretty nasty sound, but I quickly moved on to a Roland W30, which I found through reading Future Music that Liam from The Prodigy used a Roland W30 to make his Prodigy record. So I'm like, oh, I have one of those.
Thank you very much.
Got my head around that. And then computers came along. The first computer I had was an Atari 1040 STE running Cubase, and that was a learning curve. Whoa. Having no idea about MIDI, that was another couple of years getting my head around that. And you just keep going along, and you're adding all these little skills and little bits of information. And then I moved on to a PC running Cubase. I think I stayed on there for maybe 6 years. And then I finally came over to Mac on Logic. I used Logic for maybe another 5 years, but never really kind of got a grasp on it. Never really felt comfortable. It was only when I moved on to Ableton that I'm like, right, I can do some damage on this program. And that was I've been on Ableton for a good 15 years now, I would say.
So speaking of studio technology, a geeky question perhaps, favorite plugin or plugins?
I spent a lot of time in Cable Guy's Shaper Box. When you're working with disco samples, funk samples, whatever it may be, it's a great side chaining program it's a multi-band side chainer, so you can have a curve for the low, the mid, and the high. There's a lot of other great features as well, but I just spend so much time on that window, just massaging the curve, just getting it exactly right. So only what I need is coming through the side chain for the disco filters. So I guess that would be the one that I spend most of the time on. And yeah, I think if I didn't have that one, I'd be a bit lost.
Cool. Jumping back to the Sgt Slick identity, or more prominently the output that you have, the production output. What's the difference, to the people who don't know your work intimately, between a Sgt Slick Melbourne edit, a discotizer, and a recut?
Yeah, I get this question quite a lot. All right, so the Melbourne recut. Look, I started doing those when I moved back to Melbourne. When I moved back to Melbourne from LA, and I was DJing, and I really needed. I was a bit like separated from the music scene out here, a little bit unaware of what was going on. So I decided when I moved back here that I was going to make some edits that were specifically for Melbourne, and literally called them the Melbourne recut. So that while I'm scrolling through my tiny little window on Record Box, all right, I see the word Melbourne. All right, that's something that might work here. I've played them in other cities as well. They're not just for Melbourne. Let's just clear that up. But I don't know. It's also like I guess a little love letter to my hometown. Like I love living here, and we have a great music scene and a lot of great DJs and a lot of producers. And the first Melbourne recut I did was Gimme Gimme Gimme. So, and that's given a lot of exposure. Every time someone sees that, they're going to see the word Melbourne.
Yeah, between discotizer and recut, then let's drill down to that one.
Discotizer now. Usually, a discotizer is something where I will grab an a cappella from a record and try and find a disco loop that sits really well with it. I've done a lot of those over the years. Probably one of my favorite ones is the New Shoes, I Can't Wait discotizer recut. So yeah, that's more using a disco sample in the traditional way that we did when we started using disco samples, which is find a bar or 2 bars, loop it all up, filter it down, a few stutters here and there, rearrange. Yeah, so that's mainly what a discotizer recut is. On the other hand, though, I have done a few like straight edits of disco records where I have called it a discotizer recut. So yeah, just to confuse everyone a little bit more.
Keeps it all interesting, Andy. And speaking
Yeah,
of
exactly.
and speaking of recuts and everything, just one of the most impactful recuts I think that's happened in the past probably few months has been the Depeche Mode recut that you did. I mean, did it take you by surprise the amount of DJs and top 5 DJs in the world are dropping this at EDM festivals? Did this surprise you, or did you think that this baby's going to rock?
Yeah, well, I've got some amazing videos, and they still come in every day on my Instagram. I get tagged in a lot of stuff, but I guess the most impressive one was when I saw Camel Fat closing Glastonbury with my Enjoy the Silence recut. It was like, whoa.
Wow, beautiful.
Look, that's a song. Depeche Mode have always been a favorite band of mine, but here in Australia, I wouldn't say they're a mainstream band at all. They're still a little like kind of under the radar. Um, as opposed to the US, when I was living in LA, like Enjoy the Silence is an FM radio mainstay, and Depeche Mode are probably almost on the same level as U2 out there as I know they are in the UK. And I always did want to do that record, but I think I maybe started it like 5, 6 times and just got bogged down in. It's got a very punchy drum sound, and like to kind of duck that in under more modern drums, I was finding really difficult. But I finally did find a way, and yeah, that one's been really popular. And yeah, it's if you have to ask me one song, my all-time favorite song, I think like Enjoy the Silence like would
Amazing.
be the one I would choose. So yeah, it's been great to see that get out there, and don't want to give too much away, but I believe we're putting it on our first Mastermix Sgt Slick volume, so that's really exciting
I think
as
that
well.
might be happening. I think it might be happening. Let's just shoot over to the DJ side of your life again briefly. You've recently toured with the Ministry of Sound. I think it's called the Testament Tour, where you're looking at the hits from the club hits from the 90s and double O's specifically. Did you play some of it or all of it on vinyl? And how was it bringing the sounds of the 90s and the double O's to a fresh audience?
Yeah, it's I played 3 of the shows. I played the '90s show here in Melbourne in a beautiful venue called the Timber Yard, which is literally an old timber yard in the inner city of Melbourne. And then I played the 2000 show here in Melbourne as well last weekend. And then I went up to the Sunshine Coast and I played the 2000 show up there. I didn't. None of those shows were actually on vinyl. I think you might have seen a video of me playing vinyl. That was a different show.
I apologise.
Yeah,
But tell us a
that's
bit about
okay.
that anyway.
That's okay. I did turn up with my records to one of the shows, and they kind of freaked out because I had that other vinyl show afterwards, and they're like, "What?
Gotcha.
What? You're playing vinyl? We don't tell." But
Quick, call
no,
the hire company.
that was actually my first vinyl set in 20 years. The one that you saw the video of, and wow, that was fun. Yeah. But anyway, back to the Ministry shows. Yeah, they're just amazing. Like beautiful venues, incredible lineups. For the 90s show, they had Danny Rampling, Seb Fontaine, and Judge Jules come out to do the shows, and they just destroyed it every time. Every time I saw them. So it was nice to meet those guys again. Met a few of them over the years, but the crowd who come to these shows, especially the 90s ones, these aren't people that go out every weekend. They come out maybe 2, 3 times a year, and they come to party. Like, and these are music lovers as well. So I do make a lot of edits and recuts for these shows just to give a bit more punch to these classics. But it's not like you can just throw a tech house drum loop under Expansion's Move Your Body or something like that. They want to hear it the way they remember it, and yeah, I think we all have an attachment to the music that we grew up with or came into the scene with. I came into the scene in the 90s, so that music, especially for me, is like very special, and I do love playing those shows.
Yeah, and you mentioned the audience that comes specifically and remember that music and come specifically to hear it. But let's just talk briefly about the Gen Z, the younger audiences that you play to, and the way that they absorb and experience a club night, a festival, or whatever. Specifically, the mobile phone usage, kind of dancing, not dancing. What's your take on the view of a DJ who was there in the 90s and experienced what you did, looking at the way that the younger generation are absorbing dance music these days? What's your take on that whole vibe?
Look, I'm not going to lie. Like I used to love playing long records. Like a 10-minute record which has three breakdowns, and everyone stays on the dance floor. You just can't do that these days. That's just a fact of life. So another thing that I'm doing with a lot of these older records is shortening them down, making them easier to play on the dance floor for 2024. The phones thing, yeah, I wish it wasn't that way, but hey, like I can sit on my couch at home and complain about it on Facebook and and be one of those guys, or I can embrace it and move forward and just and deal with it and try and put my own spin on it. And that's the way I choose to move forward and to roll with it. Yeah, but with technology comes great things, and it comes also the things that are not so fun.
Yeah, I mean, some clubs actually are enforcing a no phones policy, aren't they, as well? Have you come across any of these clubs?
I haven't come across any of them here, but I have seen it happening a lot in the UK and Europe.
So, Andy, let's look at quite a darker period of within dance music culture, but one that seemed to actually launch one of your biggest records, the COVID period, with the Gimme 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 aside. How was that for you? How did you creatively, keep motivated and enthused about the situation that was happening globally?
I decided pretty early on. Well, there's really no point in working on like too much original music or investing in sample replays and things like that when there was no certainty about when you could actually get out and start playing these things, seeing some return on gig bookings and remix requests and things like that. So um, I decided, I'm pretty organized already, but I decided to really knuckle down on my studio workflow and just get it to a point where when everything did come back, I could really take off at a million miles an hour. And I stayed in the studio. I stayed in the studio 9 to 5 through that whole COVID period. And I also just decided to to keep working on the edits so that when we did come back, I would have a catalog of familiar music as opposed to original music, because I think, thousands of DJs across the world will have been lined up ready to drop track after track after track. I just thought, well, people, when we come back, they want to have fun, they want to have a good time, give them a bit of familiarity. So I got dozens of edits in the bank while we were all on that COVID break, and I did work on my template again, my sound collection. I decided at one point actually to that when you start out producing and everything's in the computer now, you present with so many options with plugins, uh, sample packs, and I just looked at my computer one day and I'm just like, I'm going to start again. So I literally deleted all the plugins, deleted all the sample packs, reinstalled the operating system on the Mac, and just started afresh. And just decided only to add the things that I know in a day-to-day basis I'm actually going to use. So one EQ, one reverb, a couple of compressors,
Hmm.
not much else. And in terms of my sound library, you know, 20 kick drums, 20 snare drums, 20 hi-hats, and just really digging deep, um, and being really critical of those sounds. Like, can I use this? Am I going to use this? Is it possible that I'm ever going to use this sound? If not, bang, it's in the bin.
Wow.
And I think when you limit yourself that way, you become more creative with what you have. You're really taking it back to the old days when you were limited by the amount of equipment you had. Like, if you want a bass sound, that's one synthesizer. If you want a piano sound, that's another synthesizer. If you want a pad, that's one, and that's pretty much your whole track. And some great music was made in that time period. So just really like going back to the limitations, and that's been one of the best things I've done, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's a streamlining and housekeeping thing that you did there, really. But I actually do get the whole kind of out with the old, in with the new. I mean, from my personal perspective throughout the years as a producer and remixer, I think every few years I would literally, do you remember the floppy disk we used to have for samplers and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
You used to walk into the studio with your floppy disk and everything in a case, guarded so nobody else had them, kind of thing. And then I think every sort of few years it would just literally, no, I want to reinvent myself now. You can all just go in the bin, and do a bit of that kind of emergence, like coming out of the cocoon with a new identity. But I do also get the kind of housekeeping thing as well, and the less is more vibe as well. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, I still add sounds to my library, but the important thing is, if I add something, I'm going to take something away. So I'm always, and I always only have this little window of sounds that I have to choose from. And they're all sounds that sonically go with the music that I'm producing. Like, I'm not worried that I'm going to miss some, closed reversed hi-hat that's hiding in a folder, 25 clicks away. It's like everything that I need, that I could possibly need, is right there in my browser on Ableton. And I've actually taken it to like quite psychotic levels as well, because with those 20 kick drums, I've actually created one long audio file, and now all I do is I drag that audio file in, and I move my loop brace along in Ableton and audition the sounds live in the arrangement, going through the EQ channel, going through the compression. So it's just a little workflow that I found by accident, and I've done the same thing with all hi-hats. Everything's arranged into little 1-bar loops. I drag that whole file into Ableton, set my loop brace, and I got the up and down arrow, and that moves to the next sound, And when you just end up like flying around, and when you hear the sound that fits in with the groove that you're working on. I just find it's a really fast and fun way of working now.
Let's jump back to a more positive subject, even though that was very interesting, but it started with the COVID discussion. Let's talk about some of the big records, not deep diving like we have, but the award winners. You've won a multitude of awards over the years through your career. Which one? And if I dare use the pride word, which one makes you the proudest of what you've achieved with that release?
I think I'll have to choose "Gimme Gimme Gimme" because it did come at a kind of critical time in my career. As I said, when I came back from the US, I was a little bit burnt out and a little bit like wondering, what am I going to do? Am I going to continue on this? And just to be able to drop that one and just have like a complete like U-turn in my career and fortunes, I guess. And I was lucky because I arrived back in Australia and just started getting booked pretty much straight off the back of that record, and that's like continued on and really pushed me in the direction where I am now, which is a lot of edits, digging deep on disco samples and finding undiscovered records in that era and trying to bring them back. So, I would definitely choose that one.
Right, I get it.
And I got a gold record sitting for it right there as well. So
there you go.
A good thing too.
Beautiful. Can we see that again? Actually, just see a little bit, because that is quite beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look at that.
There's that, and then that was the ARIA award for my first record, White Trouble Black Bass. So there
There
we go.
you go.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Let's another topic which is very important to DJ culture these days is the world of self promotion, being your own marketing person, social media, etc. Do you feel that's for yourself specifically, not looking at other artists? Do you feel that this is really important that you maintain a heavy social media presence, interacting, posting, or are you a bit more relaxed and chilled on it?
I'm definitely more relaxed and chilled on it. I mean, I'm told constantly by the record labels and people I work with that I need to be on there more. I need to be doing this. I need to be doing that. But I just like it to be a genuine thing. I don't like these staged videos, and yeah, I kind of sit here cringing when I see those kinds of things. So if I'm in the studio and I'm working on something and I'm like getting a really positive vibe from it, often I'll pick the camera up, turn it around, just film 20, 30 seconds of it, throw it on Instagram, and it's actually a really good way of getting instant feedback too, because the comments start coming in. Oh my God, I've been looking for an edit of this record, or oh, I haven't heard this one for years, or like, when are you dropping this, Slick? That kind of comment. And Facebook, especially, I've just found recently has just my pages has really the interactions have really increased because as I post my ideas or works in progress or YouTube links, uh, or I often ask for like recut suggestions as well. And I don't know if you've seen them, but like sometimes there'll be like 400 or 500 comments of things that people would like to.
Wow.
So it's pushing me, helping me, and pushing me in certain directions as well. So I just
Yeah.
like, yeah, I prefer the organic, natural, um, you know, style of posting and interacting rather than, all right, today I'm going to sit down, I'm going to make some
Something
content.
contrived.
I'm,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah, I'm going to post it next week at this time because this is the time I've been told where most people are watching. I know in some ways I probably should be doing that kind of thing as well, but
Well,
that
if
ain't
it's any
me.
consolation, I'm in your camp. I'm totally in your
Oh,
camp. But
good.
one thing I really have enjoyed on your socials these past few months is when you do a kind of a deep dive into how you made a recut or a discotizer, and you show people a few of the tracks on the multi and everything. Is this something you enjoy? Do you think you may do more of that in the future?
I'll definitely do more of those in the future because yeah, I do get a lot of feedback from those, and I know a lot of producers, young guys and old guys, are watching the way I do it. And like, I'm not someone who likes to guard, my workflows and my techniques. I really do like to share, uh, and it does take a bit to set up those videos to get everything running smoothly. But yeah, I think in the long run it's worth it. And yeah, if I can help a couple of people along the way, it definitely makes me happy as well.
Oh, it's a good vibe to hear. So, Andy, myself and the Mastermix team are super stoked that you've joined the platform. But what new vibes do you think this is going to bring to you as an artist and to your global audience?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to be on the platform as well. It's something I've kept an eye on over the last couple of years, that's for sure. Like, you've got some amazing, iconic producers on the books now: Ben Liebrand, Dr. Packer, DJS, and many more. And I don't know, just watching my Facebook actually over the last couple of years, and I think I mentioned this to you that a few of the times I've posted, people are like, "Can we get this on Mastermix? When is this going to be on Mastermix?" And that kind of got me thinking, well, maybe it should be on Mastermix. And then by chance, you you messaged me, and here we are talking about it today. So no, I'm really excited to have a official and legal outlet for my recuts. To now have a store where people can just go and get them in. Lossless quality and in a collection is going to be a great thing for me. You're certainly going to cut down my work time as well, because I reckon I spend at least a day a week answering emails and sending links for these things. So it'd be great to have them all in one spot, and as I said, legally cleared. I love the way you guys do it, through the official channels. The artist gets paid, and the music is accessible 24 hours a day. You don't have to wait for me until I'm online or till my busy weekend's finished to get on the email. So I'm really excited, and I can't wait to release Volume 1, and then let's see where we go from there.
So, Andy, thank you for joining us today. It's been fantastic chatting with you. But before we go, could you just tell everybody where they can find you on social media?
Sure, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, X, whatever it's called. And I'm quite active on each of those channels. If you ask me a question, I'll definitely answer it. I'll definitely interact, and come to join me on any of those.
Fantastic. And it's SGT_SLICK, is it?
I think most of them are SGT_SLICK. Yeah.
I'm sure everybody will find you. Andy, thank you again. It's been a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time out on your busy schedule. Welcome to the Mastermix platform, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, man.
Thanks, Paul. Great to chat.
Cheers for now. Bye.
See ya.